The research vessel's alarms screamed through the corridors as Ada ran, her four-fingered hand pressed against the bleeding wound in her side. Behind her, the sounds of battle and death echoed through the ship's metal halls. The swarm had come out of nowhere, their black ships appearing like shadows among the stars before tearing into the vessel's hull. "Get to the escape pods." The captain's voice crackled over the ship's communication system for the last time before dissolving into static. Ada didn't need to be told twice. She had watched through the lab's cameras as the swarm's soldiers tore through the ship's defenders, their armor seemingly immune to energy weapons. The escape pod bay was just ahead. Ada's heart pounded against her chest as she pressed her hand against the security scanner. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing rows of escape pods. Most were already gone, launched by her fellow crew members in desperate bids for survival. She stumbled into the nearest pod, leaving a trail of purple blood on the white interior. Her hands shook as she initiated the launch sequence, muscle memory from countless drills taking over. Through the pod's small window, she could see more of the swarm ships arriving, their obsidian hulls reflecting the light of nearby stars. Launch sequence initiated, the pod's computer announced in its calm voice. "Warning, multiple hostile contacts detected. Recommended course plotting limited." "Just get me out of here," Ada whispered, clutching her wound tighter. The pod's medical system released a spray of healing mist, but she knew it was only a temporary fix. The gash was deep, and she was losing blood fast. The pod shuddered as it disconnected from the ship. Through the window, Ada watched her home for the past 3 years grow smaller. The research vessel's once beautiful silver hull was now punctured and burning, pieces of it floating away into space. A flash of light caught her attention. Another explosion ripped through the ship's main section. Her heart clenched as she thought of all the people still aboard. The pod's engines roared to life, pushing her away from the battle. But the swarm wasn't done. A smaller attack ship broke away from the main group. Turning to pursue her, Ada's fingers flew over the control panel, trying to remember her evasive training. Warning, hostile craft approaching. Impact imminent. The first shot from the pursuing ship missed, but the second clipped the pod's engine. Warning lights flooded the small cabin as the pod spun out of control. Ada's head slammed against the wall, stars exploding behind her eyes. Emergency protocols engage, seeking nearest viable landing zone. Through blurry vision, Ada saw a moon growing larger in her window. It was gray and cratered, but the pod systems had detected something there, some kind of settlement or base. She tried to focus on the readings, but the pain in her head and side was becoming overwhelming. The pod entered the moon's atmosphere at the wrong angle, heat building up around the hull. Ada could feel consciousness slipping away as the G-forces pressed her into her seat. The last thing she saw was the moon's surface rushing up to meet her, and what looked like artificial lights in the distance. The impact was devastating. The pod's safety systems deployed, but they were designed for controlled landings, not crashes. Ada was thrown against her restraints as the pod skidded across the rocky ground, leaving a trail of debris and burning metal. When it finally came to rest, half buried in the gray soil, the only sound was the quiet hiss of dying systems and the ping of cooling metal. In the distance, lights began to move. Someone had noticed the crash. But Ada couldn't stay awake any longer. As her consciousness faded, she thought she saw a figure in some kind of armor approaching the pod. Her last thought before the darkness took her was a simple prayer to any gods that might be listening. Please, help. Marcus had seen plenty of strange things during his 3 years at Outpost Luna 7, but a burning alien escape pod falling from the sky was definitely a first. He watched through his suit's enhanced vision as the pod carved a deep trench across the moon's surface, finally coming to rest 2 kilometers from the base perimeter. "Command, this is Patrol 7, he said into his radio, already moving toward the crash site. "We've got a confirmed pod crash. Design matches Allied species tech, requesting immediate backup and medical support." "Copy that, Patrol 7," Commander Hayes' voice crackled back. Proceed with caution. Medical team is en route. Do not open the pod without proper containment protocols. Marcus approached the wreckage carefully, his rifle ready but pointed down. The pod's hull was still hot, glowing slightly in the moon's eternal twilight. Through a cracked viewport, he could see movement inside, and something that made his heart skip. Purple blood smeared across the white interior. "Command, we've got an injured occupant," he reported. "It's a Stellar Union diplomat or researcher, judging by the uniform. Pod integrity is failing. Requesting permission to breach." There was a pause on the radio. Marcus knew he was asking Hayes to break about 15 different first contact protocols. But there was a life at stake. "Permission granted," Hayes finally responded. "But Marcus, be careful." Marcus activated his suit's emergency seal and approached the pod's hatch. The external release was damaged, but his suit's enhanced strength allowed him to pry it open. A rush of escaping air greeted him, along with the sharp smell of burning electronics even through his filtered air supply. Inside, he found her. The alien was humanoid, but with gray-blue skin and delicate features that reminded him of old stories about elves. She was slumped in her crash restraints, purple blood seeping from a wound in her side. Her chest moved slowly. She was alive, but barely. "Hey," he said softly, knowing his suit would translate basic speech. "I'm here to help. You're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing irises that shifted color like an opal. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Marcus worked quickly, his medical training taking over. He applied emergency sealant to her wound and carefully released her from the restraints. The pod systems were dead, but his suit's scanner showed multiple fractures and internal bleeding. "Command, she's critical," he reported. "Where's that medical team?" 2 minutes out, Hayes responded. "Status: she's one of the Stellar Union researchers. Looks like she ran into trouble up there." Marcus glanced at the pod's external hull, noting the weapon damage. "Bad trouble." The alien's hand suddenly gripped his arm with surprising strength. Her eyes opened again, and this time there was fear in them. "Swarm," she managed to say in broken English. "Coming." The swarm. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Everyone knew about the swarm, the mysterious species that appeared from nowhere to attack ships and colonies. They never left survivors, until now. The sound of approaching vehicles made him turn. The medical team had arrived, their lunar rover kicking up gray dust as it sped across the surface. Dr. Reed jumped out before it had fully stopped, carrying advanced medical equipment. "Status?" she asked, kneeling beside them. "Multiple injuries, heavy blood loss," Marcus reported. "She's conscious but fading." "Doc," she says, "the swarm is coming." Reed's expression hardened as she began treatment. "Then we better get her stable and back to base. Because if the swarm is really coming, we're going to need everything she knows." Marcus helped transfer the alien to a medical stretcher, noticing how she kept hold of his hand, even in her semi-conscious state. As they loaded her into the rover, he made a silent promise. Whatever was coming, whatever the swarm was planning, they would protect her. It wasn't just about military protocol anymore. It was about doing what was right. The medical bay's soft blue lights cast gentle shadows across Ada's face as she stared at the ceiling. 3 days had passed since her crash, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the swarmed ships tearing through her research vessel. She saw her friends, her colleagues, people she had worked with for years, disappearing in flashes of light and darkness. A quiet knock at the door broke through her dark thoughts. Marcus stood there, holding what looked like a data pad, and 2 cups of something steaming. "Brought you some tea," he said, entering the room. "And thought we could practice your English a bit more." Ada sat up carefully, her side still tender from the healing wounds. "Thank you," she said slowly, pronouncing the words as he had taught her. The universal translator helped, but learning the actual language gave her something to focus on besides the memories. Marcus pulled up a chair and handed her one of the cups. "How's the pain today?" Better, she replied, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. Dr. Reed says I can walk tomorrow. That's great news. He smiled, and Ada noticed how his expression seemed to light up his whole face. Humans were so expressive, so different from her own people's subtle color changes and gesture language. A sudden alarm from somewhere in the base made Ada flinch, spilling a few drops of tea. Her heart started racing, and the room seemed to spin for a moment. Hey, it's okay, Marcus said quickly, reaching out but stopping short of touching her. Just the shift change signal. You're safe here. Ada took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I know. I keep thinking they'll find me. The swarm never leaves survivors, Marcus. Never. Well, they left one this time. Marcus's voice was firm, and we're not going to let them finish what they started. The outpost's defenses are strong, and we've got reinforcements coming. Ada looked down at her tea, watching the small ripples on its surface. I should tell Commander Hayes, what they were looking for. Marcus leaned forward slightly, but didn't push. He just waited, letting her find the words. Our research, she continued. We were studying ancient ruins on the outer rim. We found something. Patterns in the technology, signs that the swarm had been there before. Long before. We think. She paused, gathering her courage. We think they're not just raiders. They're looking for something. Something they lost a long time ago. And they attack your ship to stop you from finding it. Ada nodded. The captain tried to delete our data when they boarded, but I had backup copies in my personal files. Files that survived in the pod's computer core. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. That's why you were so insistent about securing the pod's wreckage. Yes, if they get that data. Ada's voice trailed off as another memory hit her. The sound of the swarm's soldiers moving through the ship, the strange clicking noises they made as they hunted down the crew. Hey, this time Marcus did reach out, gently touching her hand. Stay with me. You're here. You're safe. Ada focused on the warmth of his hand, using it to anchor herself in the present. Thank you, she whispered, for finding me, for helping me. That's what we do, Marcus said simply. Now how about we work on those English lessons? Unless you're too tired. Ada managed a small smile. No, I'd like that. It helps keep the memories away. As they began working through simple phrases and words, Ada felt something she hadn't expected to feel again after the attack. Hope. Here in this human outpost, with this soldier who showed such kindness to a stranger from the stars, she had found more than just safety. She had found a chance to fight back, to make sure her colleagues' deaths weren't in vain. And maybe, just maybe, she had found something else too. Something she wasn't quite ready to name yet, but that made her hearts beat a little faster whenever Marcus smiled. The emergency alarm ripped through the quiet of the lunar night, its harsh tone echoing through every corridor of Outpost Luna 7. Commander Hayes stood in the control room, his face illuminated by the red glow of warning screens. The radar display showed what they had all been dreading. 3 large ships had just appeared at the edge of their detection range. They found me, Ada whispered, standing beside Marcus as they watched the screens. She had been helping in the command center when the alert came, her knowledge of the swarm making her too valuable to leave out of the planning. Multiple contacts confirmed, the sensor operator announced. Configuration matches known swarm vessels. 3 capital ships, probably carrying smaller attack craft. Commander Hayes turned to face them all. We have 2 hours before they're in strike range. I need options, people. We could evacuate, his second-in-command suggested. The underground tunnels lead to the backup facility. We could be gone before they arrive. And lead them straight to Earth. Marcus stepped forward. The backup facility is closer to the primary colonies. We'd be putting millions at risk. Ada moved to the main display, her fingers tracing the outline of the swarm's ships. These aren't their largest vessels. They're hunting ships, designed for pursuit and capture. They know I'm here, and they know I have the data. Then we destroy the data, Hayes said. Remove their reason for coming. No. Ada's voice was stronger than anyone had heard it since her arrival. Commander, what we discovered, it could be the key to stopping them. They've been raiding our worlds for decades, taking our people, destroying our ships. This is the first time we found evidence of their origins, their purpose. Marcus stepped beside her. She's right, sir. We can't lose this chance. And even if we did destroy the data, do you really think they'd just leave? They never leave witnesses. Hayes looked between them, then at the approaching ships on the screen. What exactly did you find in those ruins, Ada? Evidence that the swarm isn't natural. They were created, weapons made for a war that ended thousands of years ago. But something went wrong. They broke free, turned on their creators. The ruins contained coordinates, locations of facilities that might still hold their original control protocols. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Ada was right, they weren't just protecting one refugee. They were protecting the first real chance at stopping the swarm permanently. Sir, Marcus said quietly, the outpost's defense systems were designed to hold off pirate raids. With Ada's knowledge of their technology, we might be able to modify them enough to stand a chance. Hayes studied the tactical display for a long moment. The 3 swarm ships were moving steadily closer, their course unmistakable. Finally, he straightened up. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command, he ordered. Then I want every engineer and technical specialist working with Ada on those defense modifications. If we're making a stand, we're doing it right. As the command center erupted into activity, Marcus touched Ada's arm gently. You okay? She looked up at him, her color-shifting eyes reflecting the red warning lights. No, she admitted, but I'm done running. My people died protecting this information. I won't let that be for nothing. We'll hold them off, Marcus promised. Together. Ada nodded, then turned to the technical team that was gathering around them. The swarm's ships have a weakness in their shield harmonics, she began. If we can modify your defense turrets to match these frequencies. Outside, the eternal lunar night continued, but now 3 dark shapes moved against the stars, drawing ever closer to the outpost. The next few hours would determine not just their fate, but possibly the fate of every world the swarm had terrorized. The real battle was about to begin. Time seemed to move too quickly as the outpost prepared for battle. Ada worked with the engineering team, her fingers flying over the control panels as they modified the defense systems. Her knowledge of the swarm's technology, combined with human ingenuity, was creating weapons they had never imagined possible. The frequency modulation is holding, she reported, watching the test beam hit its target. They had converted an old satellite into a practice target, and the modified weapons had torn through its shields like they weren't even there. Marcus stood nearby, coordinating the defense teams. How many turrets can we modify in the next hour? 6, maybe 7, Ada replied. It will have to be enough. As they worked, Ada noticed something different about the humans around her. There was fear, yes, but also determination. They didn't run, didn't abandon her to save themselves. Instead, they worked harder, fought smarter, adapted faster. Marcus caught her watching him. What is it? My people. We spent decades running from the swarm. But you humans, you choose to stand and fight. He smiled. Well, we're kind of stubborn that way. Come on, let's check the eastern defenses. As they walked through the corridors, their hands brushed together. This time, Ada didn't pull away. If these were to be their last hours, she didn't want to waste them being afraid of what she felt. The swarm attacked at lunar dawn, their ships appearing like black tears in the star-filled sky. Smaller attack craft poured from their hangars, descending toward the outpost like angry insects. All defense teams, engage at will. Commander Hayes' voice rang through the command center. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. The first wave hit the outpost's shields like a thunderstorm. But this time, something was different. The modified defense turrets fired, their beams pulsing with the exact frequency Ada had calculated. Swarm ships began to explode, their supposedly impenetrable shields useless against the adapted weapons. Eastern sector clear, Marcus reported from his position. They're pulling back to regroup. But the swarm wasn't done. The second wave came in lower, trying to find blind spots in the defense grid. One of the turrets exploded, creating a gap in their coverage. They're targeting the weak points, Ada said, her hands moving across the tactical display. We need tow. An explosion rocked the command center, throwing everyone off their feet. Through the reinforced windows, they could see one of the swarm's capital ships moving into position above them. Main shields at 40%, someone called out. We can't take another hit like that. Ada looked at the display, then at Marcus. She knew what needed to be done. The pod's computer core, she said, the one that survived the crash. It's still transmitting a faint signal. That's how they found us. Marcus understood immediately. You want to use it as bait. If we can get it far enough from the base. Ada's voice trailed off as another explosion shook the building. Commander Hayes nodded. Do it. But be careful. We're not losing anyone else today. Marcus and Ada ran for the storage area where the pod's remains were kept. The computer core was small enough to carry, its casing still bearing scorch marks from the crash. I'll take it out on one of the surface rovers, Marcus said. Draw them away from the base. No. Ada grabbed his arm. We do this together. I'm done letting others fight my battles. The lunar rover bounced across the gray surface, kicking up dust as Marcus drove, and Ada monitored the swarm's movements on a portable screen. Behind them, the battle still raged around the outpost, but several enemy ships had broken off to follow them. They're taking the bait, Ada reported. 3 pursuit craft, closing fast. Marcus steered them toward a range of hills. Good thing we brought some surprises of our own. They had loaded the rover with modified weapons, smaller versions of the defense turrets. As they reached the hills, Marcus brought the vehicle to a stop in a narrow valley. Ready? He asked, reaching for Ada's hand. She squeezed his hand once, then began powering up their weapons. Ready. The swarm ships appeared over the ridge, their black hulls blocking out the stars. But this time, Ada wasn't afraid. This time, she wasn't running. The battle was quick and brutal. The swarm ships, expecting easy prey, flew straight into their trap. The modified weapons tore through their defenses, and the narrow valley prevented them from maneuvering effectively. Within minutes, all 3 ships were down. Back at the outpost, the tide had turned. Without their support ships, the capital vessels were more vulnerable. The defense turrets fired continuously, their modified beams cutting through the swarm's supposedly superior technology. Main swarm vessel is pulling back. Hayes' voice came through their radio. The other 2 are following. We did it. They're retreating. Ada watched the ships disappear into space, her heart's pounding. For the first time in decades, the swarm had been defeated, not just driven off, but truly beaten. As the adrenaline faded, she realized she was still holding Marcus's hand. She turned to look at him, seeing her own joy and exhaustion reflected in his face. What happens now? She asked softly. Marcus smiled. Now we take what we learned here, share it with Earth Command and your people. The swarm isn't invincible anymore. We can fight them. We? Ada's voice held a question. Well, Marcus looked slightly embarrassed. I was hoping you might stick around. We make a pretty good team, and the outpost could use a technical advisor who knows the swarm's weaknesses. Plus, he hesitated. I'd really like to keep teaching you English. Ada felt warmth spread through her chest. I think I'd like that. Besides, she added with a small smile, I'm still not very good at human idioms. Then it's settled, Marcus said, starting the rover's engine. Let's head home." As they drove back toward the outpost, the earth hung in the sky above them, beautiful and blue. Ada thought about everything that had happened since her crash landing. The loss, the fear, the discovery of strength she didn't know she had. She had come here broken, running from death. Instead, she had found life, purpose, and something she never expected: love. The outpost grew larger as they approached, its lights shining bright against the lunar darkness. Inside, humans and aliens worked together, preparing to share their victory with the galaxy. Today they had written a new chapter in history, proving that together they could face any threat. Ada looked at Marcus as he drove, his profile lit by starlight. Yes, she had found salvation in a human soldier. But more than that, she had found herself. And that was worth everything. The end.